Right, welcome to Cheltenham Borough Council Licensing Committee, being held on Wednesday the 3rd of December. My name is Councillor Simon Wheeler, Chair of the committee. This meeting is being streamed live to Cheltenham Borough Council YouTube channel, and the recordings of the meeting will be held for 4 years. If there are any breaks in transmission to the YouTube stream, the meeting will be adjourned for a short period until the issues can be resolved. If you're here to make representation to the meeting, you are consenting to the use of sound and video recordings for broadcasting and training purposes. Please be aware that CCTV and audio recording is now in operation in the public gallery. The recordings will be held by the council for 5 months. Please note a fire alarm test is not expected, so if the alarm does sound, you should immediately make your way to the nearest exit. Right, apologies. I have apologies from Councillor Boyes and Councillor Sankey. You know, I thought I'd saw Councillor Sankey. And Councillor Willingham will be leaving the meeting early due to a mayoral engagement. Declarations of interest. None have been received unless someone tells me different. No. Agenda item 3, minutes of the subcommittee meeting. To approve the minutes of the meeting of the licensing subcommittee, miscellaneous held on the 1st of October and the 5th of November as a true record, and the alcohol and gambling subcommittee held on the 1st. Are we happy to take those on block? And can I just have a quick show of hands for those that agree? And if and others, yes, I think that's fine. Agenda item 4, review of a sexual entertainment venue licence. Because this is a regulatory item, members must be present and have heard the proceedings in their entirety to vote on this item. We will ensure that the applicant and the applicant's representative, if they have one, are present in the meeting, and we'll ask the licensing officer, I will ask the licensing officer to introduce the report. Members will get the opportunity to ask the licensing officer questions. The applicant or their representative will get the opportunity to ask the licensing officer questions. Today, the objectors aren't present at the meeting. Their representatives will be ready by the Democratic Services officers. Oh, sorry, not reading it right. Their representations will be read by the Democratic Services officer. The applicant or their representative will be given the opportunity to present their application or make their case. Members can ask the applicant questions, then the applicant or their representative will be given the final right to reply, and then members will retire to make their decision. When members return from, they will be given their decision and the result of the vote. So I would like to invite the Senior Licensing Officer to introduce the item, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for the renewal of a sexual entertainment venue known as an SEV in respect of Under the Prom, 109 113 The Promenade, Cheltenham. The applicant is European Events Consultants Limited, and the director, Mr. Stephen Burrows, is present today, represented by his solicitors, Imogen Moss from Popston Allen Solicitors. The renewal application is to authorise the premises to provide relevant entertainment on the following dates and times, which are detailed in the report, but are the March Festival and November meet. In addition, the applicants have also applied to vary 2 of the standard licensing conditions. The conditions to be varied are standard condition 6, to be varied to read as follows. That should not be displayed outside the premises, in the immediate vicinity, or elsewhere within the town any advertisements that indicate or suggest that any form of relevant entertainment take place on the premises. This includes the display of any advertisement, word, letter, model, sign, light, placard, board, notice, device, representation, drawing, writing, or any other matter or thing, where illuminated or not, by means of externally displayed advertisement, such as on billboards or posters within the council's administrative area. The applicant is allowed to solicit individuals to attend the premises during the hours of the licence is in operation, provided no solicitation takes place to anyone who appears to be under the age of 25. And the applicant is allowed to operate a courtesy vehicle to transport dancers and clientele to and from the venues at all times. Further, to be allowed to advertise, including by way of leaflets, the courtesy vehicle at all times during the permitted licence hours. No music will be played that can be heard from outside the vehicle, and the use of the name Eroticat is permitted. Rationale explained in the application, the reason for the variation of this condition is permit to vehicle to transport clientele to and from the venue at all times, and for staff to be permitted to give out leaflets from the courtesy bus in the town. Standard condition 25 is to be varied to read as follows. Any movement that indicates sexual activity or simulated sex between entertainers or performers is strictly forbidden. In addition to the report, a copy of the application form, map of the premises and plans, along with a copy of the premises' existing SEV licence are attached as appendices. On 1st of October 2014, the Council approved the adoption of the amended provision of Schedule 3 of the LGMPA 1982 to take effect in the Borough on the 1st of December 2010. Since the adoption, any premises that want to offer relevant entertainment on a frequent basis can only do so by obtaining an SEV licence. Relevant entertainment is defined as any live performance or any live display of nudity, which is of such a nature that, ignoring financial gain, it must reasonably be assumed to be provided solely or principally for the purpose of sexually stimulating any member of the audience, whether by verbal or other means. Under the Act, premises can provide relevant entertainment on an infrequent basis without the need for an SEV licence. So it can provide. The application has been advertised in line with statutory advertising requirements. In determining the application, members must have due regard to any observations made by the Chief Officer of the Police and any other comments made by anybody else. And members are to note in particular that any objection must relate to both or either of the mandatory or discretionary grounds for refusal set out in the report. Objections made on moral grounds or values are not relevant to either the mandatory or discretionary grounds for refusal and should therefore not be considered relevant. In March 2024, a written warning was issued to the licence holder by Gloucestershire Police. A copy of this is attached as an appendix. No other enforcement action has been taken previously or since that date, and the Chief Officer of Police did not raise any objections in relation to this application. In relation to this application, the licensing authority received 24 representations. These were made up of 2 objections and 22 representations in support of the application from residents and others during the statutory consultation period. A copy of these have also been supplied as an appendix. This application must be determined on its own individual merits, taking into account the matters outlined in the report, the relevant statutory provisions, the authority's adopted policy, relevant guidance issued by the Home Office, and any objections or comments made by the Chief Officer of Police and other persons. In particular, the committee must bear in mind that its grounds for refusal of this licence application is restricted to those specified under the statutory, mandatory and discretionary grounds. For reference, these are outlined at paragraphs 4.4 and 4.5 respectively. As such, the relevance of representations made in relation to this application must therefore also relate to either the statutory, mandatory and discretionary grounds for refusal. The committee is also reminded that the authority does not take any moral stand in relation to the operation of sex establishments, such as sexual entertainment venues, because the authority recognises that Parliament has made it lawful to operate a sex establishment, and that such businesses are a legitimate part of the retail and leisure industries. It is this authority's role as the licensing authority to administer the licensing regime in accordance with the statutory provisions. As the application is seeking to vary the standard SEV licensing conditions, the committee must not arbitrarily deviate from its own adopted licensing policy. Where the committee considers there to be exceptional circumstances that may justify a deviation from the policy, this must be thoroughly reasoned and recorded. As mentioned in the report, the venue sits outside the council's designated permitted area and has been granted a licence previously. The council's policy is to not grant applications in this location. And if the committee does decide to grant this variation, it should give clear and cogent reasons for continuing to depart from that policy principle. Some interested parties have submitted written statements which will be read out by the Democratic Services Officer as they have been unable to attend. And having considered all the relevant matters, the committee must decide whether to grant the application as applied for, grant the application subject to any additional terms, conditions and or restrictions that are either specific to the licence or standard conditions, or to refuse the application. Thank you, Chair.
So do I have any member questions? Councillor William.
Well, thanks, Chair. You mentioned that this was this is a renewal. In your view as an officer, is it materially the same as the previous application that we approved?
Pretty much like for like, yeah, there's no changes or deviations to the previous renewal application.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. I ask this question each time because I think it must be a peculiarity of the licensing system. There is no office of as Chief Officer of Police. So is that a licensing legal term, Vicky? I'm looking at you for referring to somebody who is the Chief Constable of Police. It is, okay. That's relevant, actually.
Sorry, does the applicant have any questions? No, thank you very much.
The only question I do have is you mentioned about the 2024 police document. I couldn't find that in my agenda pack, that was all.
Sorry, it may have slipped being sent. I'll see if I can find a copy.
Can we hear the representations from objectors, please?
So these, I've got 2 objection statements to read out and 3 supporter statements to read out, people who couldn't attend the meeting but wanted their voices heard. So I'll start with the 2 objectors. Please remember, this is not my words, this is what I'm reading out, which will become relevant when I read one of the other statements. But thank you for the opportunity to speak at this meeting. As the committee knows, the national context for this licence hearing is an epidemic of male violence against women and girls. Rape has in effect been decriminalised, and between 2 and 3 women a week are killed by a partner or former partner. Men and boys are also at risk of violence, including sexual violence, but the perpetrators are nearly always other men. There is no epidemic of female violence against men and boys. The legal context for this hearing is a law that allows councils to decide how many strip clubs they licence in their area. The intention of the legislation, according to Home Office guidance, is to allow local people a greater say over the regulation of lap dancing clubs and similar venues in the area. Unfortunately for Cheltenham, this law has an exemption that means strip clubs can operate for 24 hours at a time without a licence, and race week is a lucrative time for a strip club. The women working in the club will make some money, but they have to pay house fees and fines, and they have to be chosen for dances. It is a risky business. Most of the profits will be made by the operator, who is a man. The Council's 2020 Community Impact Statement, which amounts to an equality impact assessment, states that there is an inherent risk for performers who work in sexual entertainment venues. Home Office commissioned research from 2019 found those who worked in strip clubs tended not to have previously worked in the sex industry. Rather, they were attracted to erotic dance specifically. However, the majority went on to escorting or working from home offering full service, though perhaps after an extended period of stripping. In other words, most of the women who work in strip clubs go on to other work in the sex industry. The Council Impact Statement also says the Council is aware that females in particular feel disadvantaged by sexual entertainment and licensing of SEVs. This is manifested in both a general sense of feeling objectified and more specifically through feeling intimidated and unwelcome in the vicinity of licensed SEVs. Licensing might make things better when it comes to strip clubs, but they're not a solution. I'd like to see no strip clubs at all in Cheltenham, but the law means that this isn't possible. If the law has changed and the 24-hour exemption removed, Cheltenham councillors could decide on the best way forward. Instead, we have this dispiriting situation where it feels nothing more can be done. For me, even more depressing is what seems to be a commonly held belief that licensing is the solution, as demonstrated in previous hearings and Councillor Willingham's letter to the Home Office in October 2024. The council has a duty of care to its local community. A licence does not make it okay for men to buy sexual entertainment from women. It's almost worse because it normalises and legitimises women being turned into objects that can be bought. I ask the committee to remember the many, many objections it has received over the years, familiarise itself with its own 2020 community impact statement and read the not buying it guidance in strip clubs and the law. I know this licence needs to be issued, but the law needs to change and Cheltenham Council could make this happen. You're going to get bored of my voice, but that was the first objection. The second one is on behalf of Glos Women. Gloucestershire Women's Liberation Collective would like to thank the Licensing Committee for the opportunity to contribute to this evening's meetings. Strip and lap dancing clubs where women are sexually objectified and the idea that men are entitled to access women's bodies is reinforced, contribute to harmful sexist and misogynistic attitudes that underpin the endemic abuse, harassment and violence against women and girls in society. Recent research carried out by the National Police Chiefs Council has described the scale of men's violence against women and girls as an epidemic and a national emergency. Much research, including that carried out by the United Nations and our own government, show the link between harmful attitudes and sexual violence. The most recent Cheltenham Borough Council Violence Against Women and Girls Safety Survey highlighted that only 5% of respondents felt very safe, with around 68% of respondents feeling not very safe in Cheltenham during race week. We know from our own research that women change what they usually do in Cheltenham during race week, with many avoiding the town centre. Women have told us of routine harassment from drunk men, their experiences of fear and powerlessness, and feeling like an object just for men's amusement. Specific complaints included turning the pubs into strip clubs again only reinforces objectifying women, and the SEVs make the atmosphere really unpleasant and unsafe for women. We remind the committee of its statutory duties under the Public Sector Equality Duty to have due regard to the need to eliminate discrimination, harassment, victimisation and any other conduct that is prohibited by or under the Equality Act. Advance equality of opportunity between persons who share a relevant protected characteristic and persons who do not share it. Foster good relations between persons who share a relative protective characteristics and persons who do not share it. We remain concerned that the sex equality concerns that we have raised in our submissions are not being adequately considered, and therefore the committee's obligations under the Public Sector Equality Duty are not being fully discharged. We are told that the committee's hands are tied in respect of the grant of SEV licences due to the existence of the sexual entertainment frequency exemption. Legislation allows for these provisions to be repealed, and we hope that the committee will continue to use whatever influence it has to lobby Parliament for such a change. Glos Women has written to Jess Phillips MP, Minister for Safeguarding and Violence Against Women and Girls, to request that the sexual entertainment venue frequency exemption be reviewed as a matter of urgency. In their response to us, the Home Office said that they are considering, as part of the government's VAWG strategy, how they can address the various drivers of VAWG, including the objectification of women and girls. If SEV licences continue to be granted, then they must be licensed on the strictest terms possible. Since we have engaged in the SEV licensing process, we have seen the watering down of standard conditions in areas such as advertising, soliciting and operating hours, with scant evidence to justify such changes. We note such variations have again been submitted as part of this application. A proposed variation to standard condition 25 allows for bodily contact between performers. We are concerned that such a variation represents a blurring of boundaries which could put women performing in the venue at increased risk of harassment and or assault. A culture where sexual violence is unacceptable cannot be created where the sexual objectification and dehumanisation of women and girls is reinforced by way of SEVs. We urge the committee to listen to the voices of women and girls and show a commitment to their public sector equality duty in deciding the outcome of this application. So, Chair, would you like me to read the supporters now? Would you like me to read the supporter statements? So I've got 3 supporter statements. And the first one starts, and this is the one I said, remember, this is not my words. I've worked with Eroticats for well over a decade now, as a performer and as a house mother, which is my current position. My role includes a range of responsibilities, with safety being central and an ongoing priority. Eroticats is the only club that I have encountered that approaches performer, staff and customer safety with such seriousness and consistency. That is one of the main reasons I am happy doing the role I do. I work alongside an excellent security team and feel incredibly safe and supported during my shift, and I'm always taken home on the free bus service that is available. Whilst I understand the reasoning behind some of the objections this licence receives every year, I also feel that many of them are coming from a moral stance and fail to recognise the facts. Eroticats is a well-run, safe, organised, conscientious and legal business. I would not continue to be involved in the events if I didn't fully agree with the way things are conducted. In regards to women feel unsafe during race meets, correlation does not equal causation. Perhaps it's that there is an influx of men in town, large amounts of alcohol being consumed, and an increase of antisocial behaviour as a result that causes people to feel less safe during these periods. To grant this licence means structure, safety and regulations which create good experience for everyone involved. Thank you. I'll read the next supporter. I reiterate my support for SEL renewal at the above premises. I have previously worked in Cheltenham for over 26 years at various clubs in the town centre. After SIA training as a close protection officer, now working in the close protection sector of the security industry, which is included for Mr Stephen Burrows being contracted during the Cheltenham March and November race meets. Regulated sexual entertainment provides a greater protection for all concerned working or attending Cheltenham festivals. The police, knowing the operator and venue, working together, creating the reputation for Cheltenham as being a safe and enjoyable experience for all. Unregulated sexual entertainment provides no protection, and the unknown entity operating during the lucrative March, October and November festivals, where police resources with the enforcement of the uncontrolled underground could be better utilised. I would urge the benefits of a regulated sexual entertainment licence to be considered during the granting of this application. And then finally, a regulated sexual entertainment venue offers far greater benefits to Cheltenham Town during the March Cheltenham Festival 2026 than any unregulated lap dancing venue. It is challenging to comprehend why anyone would consider a no-rules lap dancing venue to be a safer option than a licensed one. Numerous objections to previous applications have previously cited women's safety, attributing antisocial behaviour to sexual entertainment venues. However, there is a lack of evidence to support such claims. As stated by Police and Crime Commissioner Chris Nelson on Gloucestershire Live on the 4th of November 2021, it is hard to find specific evidence outside Two Pigs that sexual assaults have been caused by that sex club. I have looked at this quite closely. It is important to remind such individuals that this form of entertainment is lawful, even if they disagree with it on moral grounds. Cheltenham has proudly retained its Purple Flag Award for the 10th consecutive year. This accreditation recognises Cheltenham's excellence in the evening and nighttime economy, underscoring Cheltenham Borough Council's commitment to ensuring the safety of residents and visitors, particularly during the Cheltenham Horse Race Festivals. The Cheltenham Horse Racing Festivals provide crucial lifeline for many hospitality businesses in Cheltenham. Clubs that choose to diversify into this legitimate form of entertainment respond to supply and demand. By demonstrating transparency and collaborating with local authorities, they should not be penalised for adhering to the rules and creating a safer environment for performers and patrons. Please note, I find the term sex club used by the Police and Crime Commissioner to be both offensive and misleading. It creates a false impression of lap dancing in Cheltenham. Thank you for taking the time to consider this and support my application.
Thank you. Right, I'd now like to invite the applicant or their representative to address the committee.
Thank you. So I'm going to run through the grounds when you are considering a sexual entertainment venue. So looking first at the mandatory grounds, none of the mandatory grounds for refusal apply here, so that's easily dealt with. So what we do need to look at is the discretionary grounds. The discretionary grounds that are stated helpfully in the report A to C don't bite. So we need to look at the character of the relevant locality, the use to which the premises are put, and the layout and character and condition of the premises in respect of which the application is made. Looking at the layout, no issues have been raised in respect of the layout, character and condition of the premises. So moving swiftly then to locality and use for the premises. The premises does sit just outside the council's designated permitted area, but I think it's fair to say that the location sits within a recognised area that's established as part of the mixed-use nighttime economy, and it's previously been granted renewals and the initial grant of the SEV for this premises. The venue also complies with the stringent requirements in respect of signage, and it operates discreetly as an SEV on specific hours on a limited number of days per year, which the council and the police were always given that 4 week, that 1 month notice beforehand, so everybody knows when they're trading and what hours they're trading to, with minimal impact on the locality of other premises in the area, and nothing material has changed in the locality since the initial grant of the SEV licence. Looking at the application generally then, the premises have operated as an SEV since 22-23, and the applicant themselves has operated SEVs for a number of years in Cheltenham, both under the lawful frequency and as a fully licensed operator. The varied conditions, obviously the officer's report has helpfully set those out for you. It's exactly the same variation to the conditions that was granted last year. The variation of condition 6 has been varied to that wording since original grant, and it's operated under this condition without any issue. All advertising and promotional material relating to the courtesy bus are inoffensive in nature, and they comply with all of the council requirements. And I think you've got those images and what that looks like in your pack. Some of you will have seen this a number of times before. The variation of condition 25, as per last year, is simply to clarify the wording of the condition. And this is so that both the operator, everybody that works at the SEV premises, and also authorities, both council officers and police officers that come in and inspect, can be clear on what the condition is seeking to achieve, and there cannot be any misinterpretation of that condition leading to a technical breach, such as a performer tapping another performer on the shoulder to get their attention, for example, which if you read that original condition verbatim, there is room for that confusion. So having that word in makes it exactly clear what the intent of that condition is, and it's exactly the same condition that was granted on renewal in 2024. Essentially, the varied conditions that we seek are minor in their nature and effect, and they're simply about the practicalities of the operation of the venue. There have been 2 representations against the application to renew, and there have been a significant number of representations that have been in support. Again, it comes down to the fact that in a sexual entertainment venue, it's a legitimate and it is a lawful business, and under the PROM has operated on the very specific hours and dates since grant, and it operated legitimately and lawfully and has been open and transparent and worked with the local authority and the police at each stage. Just want to look briefly then at the representations that we've received. There's a discussion, I think it's at representation 18, that talks about the watering down of the council's own conditions, and I think there's a bit of a lack of understanding as to what the history of the premises are and the operation of the venue and why this was brought about and why this condition was varied in the outset. The courtesy bus has been discussed at each hearing since initial grant, with the operator confirming that it's important as a safety feature both for performers and for customers as well. Both prior to opening and after closing, and it assists with the transportation of performers if they wish to use the service, so they don't have to rely on public taxis, public transport, and just to be clear, at no time are performers on the vehicle at the same time as customers. It's very clearly demarcated as to when and where the performers are able to use the courtesy vehicle. It aids the safe transportation of customers with safe and direct transportation, and the flyers are only in relation to the bus service, and they've been approved on an annual basis with no issues or concerns raised by anybody specific that deals with and sees the operation year on year. So council enforcement goes out, visits every time it operates, so do the police officers, and I'm sure if the police felt that there were any concerns, then they would have brought a representation against the renewal application, which they have not. The objection talks about enforcing own licence conditions, and the council most definitely does this. The venue, along with other venues, are subject to rigorous inspections during operations, and the operator always works in partnership with licensing and the police during these inspections. The representation again refers to the frequency exemption. The frequency exemption is currently permitted and it's lawful, and both the applicant and committee members will be aware of the letters sent to relevant ministers on this point. Ultimately, the exemption remains as a lawful way of operating, but the exemption offers zero regulation for those activities. Being a licensed venue means that they have to have robust policies and procedures in place that are reviewed, they're inspected, they're tested annually and whenever they operate. And being a licensed venue with those policies and procedures, they adhere to it and they operate with pride and diligence on that basis. The council and the committee can only operate within the legislative framework as it stands, so giving considerations to the benefits of licensed operation is legitimate. The representation 20 from the Gloucestershire Women's Liberation Collective refers to VORG research carried out by the National Police Chiefs Council. No link in that report is cited in respect directly contributed in respect of SEVs. The research study referred to the Safe and Equal Bristol report, and that was actually criticised by the Bristol Sex Workers Collective, stating that a nil cap on SEVs would actually drive performers into unregulated underground environments without the legal protections or safe workplaces that a licensed venue gives. And the Plan International that's referred to in this objection talks about women and girls not feeling safe. Unfortunately, this is an issue that women and girls experience 365 days of the year in a myriad of locations, not just in the localities of SEVs or when SEVs are in operation. The reasons for women and girls not feeling safe are complex and varied, and it's reductive to lay this at the door of an SEV which operates on a very limited basis when there is no evidence offered of any direct and causal link. Reference is also made to the public sector equality duty, quite rightly, and I appreciate that there's an obvious tension there between the grounds for objection and what is a lawful activity. There's also tensions between objections regarding perceived objectification of women and the free choice of performers to perform at their own free will. The Institute of Licensing Journal from 2022, in July, it gave consideration to this in an article authored by Jeremy Phillips, KC and Michael Feeney. And in this, and I quote, "It's crucial to remember that the public sector equality duty does not require a specific outcome, and the duty is to have due regard to the three equality objectives. The applicant themselves is doing all they can to address objectors' concerns. we've drafted our own equality impact assessment, and Mr Burrows it participates in local safety schemes and works in partnership with authorities in a transparent and collaborative fashion. The authority is also playing its own part in engaging with government and obviously the licensing policy review that they're looking at the moment. Finally, that representation talks about concerns on women's safety. There has been no representation from the police. If there were any concerns around women's safety directly linked to this venue operating as an SEV on the limited days that it does, then the police, as the authority of crime and disorder, would have objected. The fact that they have not, then I think due weight should be given to that. And you know, the police ultimately, they would be here saying, absolutely not, do not grant this renewal. The fact that they're not is a really important, their silence is as important as anything really, because they haven't had, you know, they're consulted on this application. We pre-consult every year with them as well. And at no point have we been notified of any concerns or any problems that, you know, would come about renewing the licence. There's a significant number of representations in support of the application, and many, and I want to reiterate just what was touched upon with some of the representations that were read out, they recognise the fact that having controls in place for a licensed premises is fundamental for everybody. It's fundamental for the performers, it's fundamental for the staff that work in the SEV premises, but also for the customers as well. You know, where you were operating under the frequency exemption with none of the grounds for, you know, you don't know where they're going to be, what hours they're operating, how you're going to inspect them. The fact that you've got a licensed operator that is collaborative in their work ethic with the responsible authorities, and you know, we give the month's notice beforehand of the dates and the times that they're operating. You know their policies, you know their procedures, and you know that individuals sit on various different safety advisory groups for Cheltenham, should give plenty of reassurance. So just summarising that, because I'm conscious of everybody's time and if you want to ask any questions, the venue is very discreet, the impact on the locality is minimal, and they only propose to operate on a limited number of occasions each year. The applicant has an exemplary history of SEV operation, just generally at both this venue and at the other venue. I appreciate that we've got the letter from the 3rd of May 2024, but you'll see that, you know, from those discussions, you can see the positive action that was taken immediately by the operator to address any concerns that were raised. And since that, we've had no issues raised at all by the police on the trading that the venue has had since. You've had many performers returning year on year to work at the premises, and the fact that we have a performer who's given a representation to be read out tonight, you know, that should give some reassurance as well. It indicates a safe and a reputable venue to work for. The survey referred to in one of the representations regarding women feeling unsafe in Cheltenham, that is disappointing. Nobody wants to hear that. But again, we have to take into consideration what that looks like practically in the context of Race Week as a whole and the influx of a huge number of visitors coming into Cheltenham. And also, there's lots of different factors that go into that. It's not just SEV operation on a limited number of days per year. Failure to grant the renewal of a licensed SEV has a negative impact on performer welfare and safety. The activity that is being applied for is lawful. It's far better to have a licensed venue subject to robust policies and procedures, the conditions that are put forward, and the ability to be inspected, than having to rely on operators using the frequency exemption where you don't know what venue they're going to be at or when. The application requested is no different to that which was granted last year, with no evidence offered by those objecting to the operation of the venue under the days and hours applied for, as well as the varied and special conditions that has been problematic. There's been no evidence to say, actually, this has happened. There's nothing there substantive to say this venue is causing huge issues. It's just, you don't have the evidence before you to show that. So with all that in mind, we would respectfully request that the committee determine to grant the application as applied for. But if you do have any questions specific to the operation, then we'd gladly answer those questions for you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Do I have any member questions? No? Oh, yes, please. And can I say welcome? We haven't seen you for a long time. I know there have been issues. So it's good to see you here tonight.
Thank you so much. That's really kind. So this might sound slightly facetious. I've noticed from the floor plans, which are really useful for reference, by the way, there are smoke detectors in the main body of the building, but there aren't any in the temporary structure. Do you feel like that might be something that you need to consider, to enhance safety measures?
So smoke detectors, I suppose, potentially yes. I mean, I don't know whether Steve can give any input on that, but ultimately, when it comes to the licensing of the SEV, not ultimately of huge relevance, but I don't know what if you've got anything to say about like the fire safety element in the outside area.
It's completely compliant with the regulations of the fire for the venue, including the external.
Yeah, so they'll have obviously their FRA report and things like that they have to comply with as a venue anyway. So yeah.
I really appreciated the fact that you would have sort of pretty stringent monitoring as well of like the active working space, and I also kind of I can understand from this that there's going to be customers escorted around the space as well, so there's no chance of them kind of going off. I was curious a little bit about having dedicated space for the performers to kind of, because they have their cloakrooms, don't they, and changing rooms, and are the only toilets that are available for them to use the female toilets that are depicted on the floor plan, or are there any supplementary spaces for them as well?
Currently, the operation is divided. We've got two options. We've run both cases. We're waiting for the renewal of the policy to see which direction we're going. But the two policies will exist: either performers toilets or performers only, and gentlemen's toilets, or we've run performers with ladies' toilets and gentlemen's toilets. Sorry, so the two options are performers only toilets and a mixed gender toilets, or female toilets and male toilets. Well, we're waiting from the policy changes to see what is the preferred method from the council and the police.
Ultimately, at the moment, the operator operates in conjunction with what the licensing policy for SEVs currently specifies.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Do I have any other questions? No? So you now have your final right of reply if you have anything further to say.
There's not really ultimately an awful lot more for me to say. I think we've covered the majority of it. I think it's just remembering that it's a lawful and legitimate business. It's about providing safety for all, for performers, for staff and for customers. And the only way that that is really possible is to within the remit of the licensing sort of format as it stands is through having conditions, policies and procedures, ability to inspect, contact with licensed operators. And the only way that you're going to do that is through having a licensed venue. That's just not something you're able to get with operators operating under the frequency exemption. So I think it's just asking for you to bear that in mind and kind of sort of impress upon you that actually being licensed is a good thing, because you've got that clarity, you've got that transparency, and you've got that accountability as well, because, you know, if there was anything severe that would happen, you've got police enforcement action, you've got the possibility for them to review. And again, the only way you're going to have that is through having a licensed venue. And that's pretty much all I would like to sort of reiterate on that point. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I did originally say we would now retire to make our deliberation, but my personal view is that we ought to debate this in public. How does the rest of the committee feel? I'm seeing nods everywhere. So, with that, who would like to start? Councillor Joy?
I'm happy to start if that's helpful. But yeah, it kind of I found this work in regard to SEVs incredibly interesting and useful just for general wider context. I think my own belief with SEVs specifically is I actually kind of feel as though any kind of interrogation of SEVs as somehow associated purely with sexual violence and immorality, I actually kind of feel I feel like that's a little bit simplistic. I think, you know, as you've mentioned before, I actually sometimes feel as though those associations and those contexts drawn actually stigmatizes the female body. I kind of feel that there's a sense of alienation from the female body just in general, because it's, I mean, if you look on the internet, the fact that, you know, we can't even get adequate sexual health education shared appropriately because it's just kind of put down as simply pornography. So we can't even fundamentally learn about ourselves without that whole act being stigmatized as sexual. And for sexualized gratification, I just feel as though it's slightly barking up the wrong tree to kind of lump all of these kind of expressions of, you know, physical presence, if that makes sense, into just this really reductive way. I actually also kind of feel as though, you know, what you're doing is in managing sexual entertainment venues. In some ways, I think that it's an important element of normalizing robust boundaries on personal space. The fact that you have the structure around it and like kind of creating this baseline of this is how you treat performers, this is how you're respectful towards their boundaries. I think that that's actually really an important part of the discussion that we should be having. The fact that actually no one really is safe from any kind of harassment in any kind of any kind of space at any particular time. I kind of feel as though some of the problems that we're facing in society, you know, really don't stem from the presence of SEVs. It's a wider, more systemic issue. As well as the fact that, honestly, you could say that any working environment that requires physical labor makes, you know, a transactional relationship between the worker and anyone that they're employed by. You could say that for the armed forces or for manual labor as well. Like, in some ways, aren't they also having to sell their bodies for, you know, to be endangered or to be subjected to violence or subjected to injury? You know, I kind of feel like this is like a wider situation than purely this. So my personal stance on this is very much, I really support the fact that we can license SEVs. I'm really happy that we can have the ability to do that. I would welcome more SEVs to come under our remit, and I just really value the contribution that local communities can make in terms of those, and I appreciate you working with us to try to create a really strong, the best outcome possible for as many people as possible, really. So thank you, everyone.
Councillor Willingham.
Thanks, Chair. If I start with the obvious thing that as a committee and as a council, we are here every year looking at this, and we've heard the officer confirm there's no material difference from last year. So from a purely legal point of view, it would be irrational for us as a committee to do anything other than approve it. And courts don't like committees doing irrational things. So I think that's the starting point. I do want to cover off the Equality Act duty that we have. So if you consider the objectors and the protected characteristic that they are talking about is being female, if you consider the performers, their protected characteristic is female. As was said, the Equality Act says we must give due regard. Due regard doesn't require a particular outcome. And ultimately, in terms of the safety of the performers, the safety of the public, the safety of customers, who may be women, and the safety of the general public, people working in the premises behind the bar who are not performers, actually having it with a licence in place in one place or places that are known is considerably better for all concerned. You could also look at the fact about the exemption. We talk about the use under the exemption. This council, in one of its buildings, hosts sexual entertainment under the exemption, but we never get any complaints because it's the Dream Boys, male performers for a female audience. So you can't discriminate based on the sex of the performer any more than you can on the sexual preference of the audience. So hopefully that's covered off the equality impact in terms of the Equality Act. When I was previously chair of licensing, I attended as a shadow the visits that our licensing enforcement team make to the premises and that they make to premises operating under the exemption. I've spoken to performers, and I think the comments from the objectors don't represent and don't speak for what the performers say in terms of what they have said that they do, what they have said is effectively they work in these premises, and some of them will work doing camera work at home, but they are not moving any further into the areas that the objectors suggest they are. Not that that's a material consideration for us, but ultimately what consenting adults choose to do within the law, their business. Our role as a committee is public safety, not public morality or getting into any of that. Personally, I think this has been revisited so many times. We should almost move to a vote to with the proposition that we just approve it as is. I know others may wish to speak, but actually, we've been here, we've done this so many times. There's nothing different.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. And can I just support Councillor Willingham in suggesting that we move to the vote very shortly? I'll start off by thanking Councillor Joy for their remarks. Actually, I think it set the tone for probably the committee's thinking, and I think it reinforces the fact that we do take our responsibilities in this matter very, very seriously. I noticed that Councillor Willingham, who went as chair, did write to Jess Phillips in October of 2024, and I think the reply that he got was, there's no plan to change the law. So we've done what we can at the primary legislation level, and the response from the current government is no, we've got no plans to change the way things are. So the best way to be is regulated, as happens now, and as is happening with this application for us today. It's not for me to speak on behalf of the police, but I think it's relevant with the comments that have been made today about Chief Officer of Police. Our Chief Constable is Maggie Blythe. I'm sure she has a very strong view on this sort of activity and related comments about it. But what's interesting is that the Deputy Chief Constable, Katie Barrow-Grint, came to us from Thames Valley Police, where she was a lead officer in something called Project Vigilant, which is a proactive policing initiative designed to prevent sexual offences occurring before they occur by identifying and disrupting predatory behaviour. I'm pretty sure that if she was leading that in Thames Valley and she had some concerns about this application, then those concerns would have been shared with us. So I think in terms of due regard, I take a lot of due regard to what the Chief and the Deputy Chief don't say in that respect. So I support Councillor Williams' view that we should move to the vote.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Then I will have my two penneth, though I know we've got a very full agenda. I did feel it was a little bit unfortunate that we weren't able to question objectors or supporters for that matter, but that is what it is. I mean, the one thing that was asked as a change was the argument over touching. When you're working in a very crowded area, accidental touching can happen. we need to put a clear line between what is accidental touching and which is sexual touching. And I think we've covered it. I don't think, as one of the objectors was saying, it's blurring of the rules. It is actually trying to do exactly what the motive of the rule says. And so I think, I'm perfectly happy with that. And as has been said many times, the difference between licensing, where we have a whole raft of conditions we put on the applicant in order to make sure that performers, staff, members of the public and customers are all kept as safe as possible, is far better than having a system whereby we use the exemption and I won't say it's a free-for-all, but it can be held. We have, as a council, we have no control over it, and performers have said many times to us that they feel far safer working for an organisation that are being licensed, and I think from historically we have felt quite comfortable with the applicant and the regime that they're operating. I would far sooner that than be going for people using the exemption. And even if in the future someone would remove the exemption, I think the applicant actually made the view that could also be dangerous in that it will be driven underground, there will be illegal SEVs opening up that we'll have no control over. Yes, the police might get involved if they know about it. So I think having a strong regulated system has got to be better. Comments made by the objectors about feeling unsafe during race week. There are thousands of people coming to Cheltenham on race weeks. I would suggest that the vast majority of them do not even know of the existence of any SEVs. I know I have spoken to people who have lived in Cheltenham for many years, and I've commented that we do have, I think it's 2 SEVs in Cheltenham licensed, and they were really surprised. They had no idea. So for people coming into town, male or female, that say they feel unsafe during race week, it will be the numbers of people here and possibly the fact that there's a lot of alcohol being used. The fact that there is an SEV operating, I would imagine, has got absolutely no relevance whatsoever. I think that's all I have to say. But if there's nobody else wishes to say something, then I would, oh, help, did just find it just now.
Page 34, 7.7.
Yeah, oops. Sorry, 33, 34. It would be easier to drag it rather than trying to find the page. Right, yes. So I think the first vote would be easiest if we go, well, we've got grant the application subject to additional terms and conditions, or refuse the application. So can I take a vote on A, grant the application? Show of hands. Those against? Abstentions? I think that's carried then with, was it 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 1 abstention. Okay, thank you very much. So I think that has been carried. I think you know the routine by now. So thank you very much. Right, agenda item 5, Local Government Act 1972 exemption information, that in accordance with section 100A4 Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the remaining agenda items, as it is likely that in view of the nature of the business to be transacted or the nature of the proceedings, if members of the public are present, there will be disclosed to them exempt information as defined in paragraph 1 and 2, parts 1, schedule 12A, Local Government Act 1972, namely paragraph 1, information relating to any individual, and paragraph 2, information which is likely to reveal the identity of an individual. So can I have a show of hands? I think that's unanimous. Thank you.